Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. I am your host, Jimmy Good, and joining me once again is my go-to podcast compadre, Mr. Joe Lever. Joe, how the heck are ya?
I do exist.
You do exist. He does exist. Oh my gosh. Yeah, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you doing, pal?
I'm better now. See your face any chance I get. You know what I mean? Just feels so good right in the old heart here. Yeah, and it's been a couple of weeks since we've had you on, or a little bit longer than that maybe. It's been a hot minute, as the kids say.
Yeah, hot minute, my favorite coin term. Hot minute.
Is that your term? If it's your term, I have to give you a coin when I say it, right?
I do say it often, so yeah, I'll take ownership of it.
Perfect. Excellent. Everybody, if you say that in the future, you got to give Joe a coin. Preferably,
credit to Joe.
Yeah, credit to Joe. That's the coin. Not really. We're not really exchanging change right now because of the times we're in, which definitely timestamps this whole thing. But anyway, Joe, it's great to have you here. And this week, we're going to talk about a show that just wrapped up very recently. That is the first season of Loki on Disney+, which, by the way, I don't know if it's really a spoiler to say this, but there will be a second season. I didn't really know that coming into that final episode, but I was like, oh, okay, they're going to be doing that because some of these Disney+ shows seem like they're kind of maybe one and done. I guess maybe it's kind of testing the waters to see, or for some things like WandaVision, it'd be kind of hard, I think, to go back and do that again. But today we're going to talk about Loki. I'm going to try to give my best brief spoiler-free plot synopsis, and then we'll flip the old spoiler switch, and we'll get into it some more. But let's just start at the beginning here, Joe. So Loki, before we get into the actual show itself, Loki as a character, how have you felt about him over the years? Is he somebody you liked? Were you like, oh, cool, he gets his own TV show? Or was that not something that you were like as keen on compared to maybe other Asgardians or something like that?
Probably of all the characters that were getting their spin-off shows, he was the one I was most excited for.
There we go. Love it.
Yeah, I always thought Tom Hiddleston played that character well and there's good depth to the character from many different facets, right? And yeah, I think that's quite simply put, just good depth to that character and worth the attention, I think. So, yeah, this is a good way to bring him back into the MCU. They can't kill him off quite yet. He's too beloved, I guess.
Exactly. Well, that's the funny thing about just comics in general, but it's just that fandom is, bleeding into movies now, where it's like if anybody dies or goes away, it doesn't really mean that's forever. They can bring him back in certain circumstances, and this is one of those times where I think he had such a big following and so many people wanted more from him, and this was a nice way to come back to that. Because, man, like, if you talk about the villains from the MCU, he's the one that always kind of, a lot of people go, besides Thanos now, they're always, oh yeah, Loki. Who doesn't love Loki? He's a good guy, bad guy. We never know,
Yeah.
He's an instigator.
Well, and I like how in the main films they kind of bring him around full circle to, realization of his, what do you want to say? His redemption, so to speak.
His glorious purpose. Wait, no, that's a different thing. Yes, you're right. His redemption, and kind of figuring out what he wants. And I actually watched a really fascinating talk with Tom Hiddleston on, I think it was Vanity Fair. He did like a career timeline that just came out roughly at the recording of this. I'll try to remember to link it if I don't, but just look it up. And it's really cool to hear about his story, besides just Loki, other things he's done. But he talked about Loki. Thor is always asking Loki what he wants, and Tom was saying, I don't even know always what Loki wants, and maybe Loki doesn't even know what Loki wants. So it's kind of a fun character because he can go in a lot of different directions, and that makes sense for him, because that's kind of his shtick, to be mischievous, and he's maybe even tricking himself most of the time. But yeah, I'm right there with you. When they were like, Loki's getting his own show, I was like, oh wow, you could do a lot with that, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Not to mention this whole time, well, everybody knows time travel. The whole time travel aspect of it just kind of makes it, I mean, it's opening a Pandora's box, so to speak. Any direction they want to go, they can kind of go with it. But it basically makes the storyline limitless. But yeah, Tom Hiddleston too. I mean, I remember, God, there was one movie I saw him in. I forget what it was, but Crimson
Peak.
Peak.
Yep.
That was kind of a cool movie. I actually kind of
cool.
enjoyed that.
I remember it being weird. Well, like, I won't specifically spoil any part of it, but he has a very strange relationship with one of his family members, and I happened to see that film in theaters with the same relation that he has with that family member in real life. And so the scariest moment of that whole movie was how they would interact, and I was like, I kind of like look over, I'm like, this is not the movie I thought we were going to be seeing. But yeah, that's actually a pretty cool movie. That's Guillermo del Toro, and yeah, that's cool looking stuff. But anyway, he's just a cool actor, cool guy, I think. And I forget about this with him because I think they put him next to Chris Hemsworth. But Tom Hiddleston is 6'2", and you kind of feel it a little bit more on this show. He's a tall guy, but usually when I think of Loki, I don't think of a guy who's like taller than me. I'm like, what?
I think the opposite. I always perceive him as being pretty tall. He's kind of lanky, but lean. Yeah. Like,
really?
Yeah, I don't know. I always kind of felt that way. But in this show, I can see your point in that it seems accentuated a little bit.
Yeah, I guess
there's with.
Yeah, there's no spoiler. There's no Thor to play off of. Like, Chris Hemsworth is not standing next to him as like this.
Which I just recently watched on Disney Plus a little documentary that Chris Hemsworth did about sharks in Australia.
Oh yeah,
and that guy. First of all, when he's not in Thor, I was really looking at this. His stature is the same, but when he's around normal people, he doesn't seem as like roided out of his mind.
Sure.
Like when he stands next to average people or like you or I, like he's not like hulkingly huge, but man, the guy's ripped. And I'm sure he does buff up a little bit for those movies, but when he's not standing next to him, Tom Hiddleston does it makes him seem a little bit more statuesque.
Yeah, oh for sure. Well, we're going to get into it, but like I said, I want to kind of do the first little portion here just so people, for the folks out there who might be watching this and are some who haven't seen it or are like, I don't have Disney Plus, but I do like Loki. I don't know how many of those people are out there, but maybe there are some. But to give you like a brief kind of setup for the show without talking about it, because the more we talk about it, the more these TV shows are just kind of spoilery. You know, there's going to be plot points in them that we touch on that would be like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have known that, because they reveal throughout the show, and that's part of the fun. But basically, you kind of need to have watched all the way up, like the Avengers movies up through Endgame to kind of understand what's happening. If you don't, you're probably going to be very confused, but for people who don't recall, in Avengers Endgame, Loki from the end of the first Avengers film is there, and we see the kind of aftermath of what happens there, and the Avengers, who from the timeline of Infinity War and Endgame went back in time to that first big fight that they had, and they accidentally, inadvertently knock the Tesseract out of the case that they were, carrying it in. And that Loki from that timeline, he basically grabs it and he teleports away. So the Loki that we know, who does die in Infinity War in the very beginning of that movie, all that character development is gone. This is that, very angry, angsty Loki back again, and is captured by this thing called the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, I believe, or agency. I think it's authority. And they basically go around and try to deal with people who would be considered variants from the timeline, which means that like they were not supposed to exist, and they come off of the main branching, or there's just a one timeline and they kind of cause a branch to come off of that. So this group goes around, this kind of bureaucratic, kind of boring group goes throughout time and deals with these people. And Loki happens to be one of them, and they basically bring him in, and they're going to take care of him. They were basically going to delete him forever, but then they say, hey, actually, let's work together. This Agent Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, which I like seeing Owen Wilson. I don't know about you. It's nice to see him. We'll talk about him. But shows up and is like, hey, we have another variant that we have to deal with, and we think Loki is super suited for this. And it kind of is the adventure of Loki becoming part of the TVA and figuring out all the mystery behind it all. Again, we're talking in broad strokes here about this first season. Joe, I did mention him right there. Owen Wilson, how do you feel they play off each other? Because, you know, maybe it's a little biased of me to say this, but I kind of enjoyed the Loki, Owen Wilson, Tom Hiddleston show. Like, I kind of felt like it was going to be a buddy cop show. It doesn't do that, but it almost does, where it's like just the two of them, you know.
A little bit, and it develops, no spoilers, but yeah, I like Owen Wilson. I think he plays his character well suited for it, kind of like well suited to playing that bureaucratic pawn, kind of like I'm the detective on the beat, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Like jaded a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, sure, but he's a charismatic guy. I mean, that's why, you know, you can attribute his success to that. So good casting choice. And does Marvel or Disney ever really miss the mark too much? No. So yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, maybe jaded was the wrong term. He's actually pretty optimistic to kind of bring Loki, which I don't know about you, but like if you were going to take the God of Mischief and make him like your, not a partner, but like somebody who helps you out with something, I would be very hesitant or reserved to talk to Loki about anything, because I'd be like, he's going to use it against me, which would be unfortunate. But yeah, and this takes place over 6 episodes, so very similar to that of Falcon and Winter Soldier, even though they kind of heralded that one as like a film that was spread out over 6. This is more television-esque. It's not, I wouldn't say nearly as action-heavy. There's action in it, and it is of that movie quality or Mandalorian quality that we're seeing from Disney+. So if you have a question or a concern about that, I think it's there, wouldn't you say?
Oh, easily, yeah. I mean, the budget and everything, I mean, it's top notch.
Yeah. Not a question there. But again, I feel like we're talking broad strokes here. It's a hard show, like WandaVision, I think, to wrap your mind around, and maybe in some respects this one's even harder, because with WandaVision, it's pretty straightforward insofar as time. You know, like stuff progresses and it makes sense. More or less how things are kind of shaping up. But this is a time-bending, you know, very cosmic adventure over every space and time you could possibly really think of. And that is where I think a lot of people were lost. I was talking to you about this, Joe. I was actually talking with some other people who were watching it, and they're like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. It's just like, what? Because it's a lot to kind of take in, I think, comparatively to a lot of these movies and shows, which are pretty, like I said, straightforward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was too bad. I followed it up until the very end.
Okay.
Like, I understood what they were talking about and how the time traveling was working and where they were going, what they were doing. Up until, I think, the final 2 episodes, I started to get confused at the end, because it's a little... Oh, whoa.
Yeah, right. Totally. Is there anything else about the show that you really liked or disliked on a very big, kind of broad spectrum?
Yeah, I really like the music and the vibe it creates. Very appropriate. I thought the music, the introductions, the credits, the music is just cool.
I like that music too, man. It kind of gives me the Stranger Things vibe sometimes with the synths, but like the seriousness of those credits, I was like, oh man, if the whole show felt like that, you know what I mean? Like really serious, kind of like, whoa.
Exactly. Yeah, serious, but also has that kind of like mystery flair to it, is kind of what I get.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always the same too, which I liked, but it always still had that kind of same through line, which was cool. Mm-hmm. So off the beaten path compliment, but I enjoyed it. Trying to think what else. Well, a lot of the set design was pretty cool, like the TVA and everything.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat. In the later episodes, like the second to last, there's a cool moment there. We won't get into that until the spoiler switch is flipped. But yeah, so from that aspect, I mean, that goes back to the quality and budget. But I mean, set design and everything was really cool. Special effects as well. I really enjoyed a lot of that. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I echo all those sentiments. I think if you're a Marvel fan, you probably watched it by now, and maybe you're just listening into this to see what we thought of it versus you. But if you're not. I would say there's a lot of stuff you should probably check out first, and this is not a deviation from what Marvel has done hugely in the past. So if you're not a huge fan of those movies, I don't think this is gonna like change you, and you're gonna be like, yes, like this, I like this. I don't like anything else, right? Because it does have a lot of that. It's an action adventure that's got a lot of comedy in it, you know. So that's their shtick. That's Marvel's, you know, thing.
Another thing I liked, I mean, with Loki, it's always appropriate, but the comedy wasn't distasteful or overutilized.
Sure, and this would be a very different show. I was listening to somebody else talk about this, but they're like saying, what if Taika Waititi from Thor Ragnarok had directed this show? I think the show would have been pretty different, and also would have been way more comedic. Like, there would have just been 3 or 4 jokes a minute. Like, it would have been like, you know, here. And if you love that sort of thing, that's great. This is not Thor Ragnarok, the TV show. I don't want people to go in and be like, oh, it's constantly funny. It's not that. But there are humorous moments for sure. And that's just a credit to the cast. And also, there's something about Tom, man. There's something about that guy. He is just, when he's on screen, he's magnetic. You want to watch him, even if he's not the focal point of his own series sometimes, because that there's a lot more going on in the show than just the name would imply, right? Because when we all heard about this show, Joe, you're probably in the same boat as me, where you're thinking, like, this is just going to be the Loki show. Like, it's just him, you know, doing stuff throughout time. I thought the trailer was going to be just his hijinks throughout time and space and stuff, and it wasn't that. It wasn't necessarily that. So keep that in mind.
Good balance to it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we both recommend it. If you want to check it out, it's something that if you have Disney Plus, I would say, you know, give it a watch. If you don't have Disney Plus, I don't know if they have a month trial or something, but there's a lot of stuff on there now that is exclusive to there that you could check out, including those other Marvel shows if you haven't caught up on them. But this is much more, I would say, more akin to WandaVision than it is Falcon and Winter Soldier so far as the TV shows go, right?
Yeah. A lot of the Nat Geo stuff is pretty cool too.
Yeah, dude, check out some of that stuff is just, especially if you have a good TV. Oh, it's gorgeous. Anyway, Joe, if you have nothing else that you want to say without spoiling stuff, I can flip the old switch here.
Flip her up.
Oh gosh, okay. I did this last week.
Easy. Are you grounded?
I thought so. I always think so. Okay. Stop!
Somebody get the defibrillator.
Those sparks, those spoiler sparks. There's so many spoilers. Oh my gosh.
3rd degree burns on the forearm.
It hurts. Oh, what if I had that kind of time and budget to sit here and just edit that onto my face for the rest of every podcast? I'd be like, oh my gosh.
Scorched and burned.
Right? My favorite thing, Joe, or one of my favorite things about the series was, I was like, how are you going to get that character development that we got from Loki in subsequent films like Thor: The Dark World, where his mom dies, or Infinity War, where he dies, or Ragnarok, all that stuff, and showing him a video of his life, his failures and shortcomings and all the stuff that's happened. I thought that was so interesting, because how many characters in, you know, fiction get the chance to do that, where it's like you take them and say, like, okay, you died, here's your life played out for you, and like, this is what happened.
And he thought it wasn't real and all that, but they convinced him. I forget how, or proved it, but anyway, within 10 minutes they had developed them from the Loki that left off at the end of that Avengers film, Battle in New York, to Loki that got his neck snapped by Thanos. Boom.
Yeah, right. And it was like, I thought that was so cool to me, and I love that Tom, how he played it, because there's this kind of like, I'm defeated, but I'm really, really sad, and like seeing his own dead body, and I was like, okay, that kind of catches up with some of that stuff. Not that his character will be exactly the same as the Loki we know, but I was like, okay, that's great. I thought that was really cool, and that first episode, I was like, here we go, you know, this is interesting.
And Owen Wilson does a great job of like pushing the point and developing him, kind of like, you know, the handler, so to speak, to get him to that point. So the delivery and everything, I think, well done. I like how his character Morpheus.
Mobius.
Mobius.
Like a Mobius strip.
He's kind of... He has a very nonchalantness about him.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's dealing with Loki, so he's got to kind of play it cool. So he kind of has this nonchalant attitude about everything, and like, no, yeah, trust me, it happened, and it's kind of well played, and to the point where it's so nonchalant, or like it's very believable for Loki.
Yeah.
So I felt that the whole delivery was believable, made sense. Loki kind of came to terms with it and all that, because, I mean, he was seeing so much evidence around him about the time travel and everything, and that they know, and then all the file information and all these things. So it was cool, and that kind of goes back to the interaction between those two characters and those two actors.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Well done on that, right?
Oh, yeah, and I think, like I said, it's not the show where it's like a buddy cop thing. They do a little bit of that, but the whole kind of Mobius thinks this Loki would be great to help him track down another Loki, another variant, who we find out later on is a female version of Loki named Sylvie, and she's been hiding out basically a few days before any major catastrophe that happens anywhere on the timeline, because that's a safe place for a variant to be, because the timeline would never track her as a variant that would continue off the timeline if that area got destroyed. So, for example, she would hang out maybe in Pompeii, like a day or two before the volcano, destroys Mount Vesuvius, and
natural disaster type stuff.
Yeah, or like even in space, they talk about that, and that there's like apparently varying levels of calamities and things like that. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I thought maybe because they kind of talk about Ragnarok there for a second, that they were going to jump, and she was going to be hanging out in Asgard or something, and she was going to be there right before the stuff of Thor Ragnarok happens, like Surtur and all that. But that didn't happen. But yeah, Sylvie, it actually kind of felt a little bit like the show shifts once we find out, she's in there, about her story. It seems more like her, to be honest. And that's not a dig, and that's, she is technically a Loki, so that kind of plays into the name of the show. But it becomes a lot more about her, wouldn't you say? Doesn't it feel that way?
Yeah, and then eventually them.
Yes, as a pair. Duo. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Kind of pretty vain to fall in love with yourself. Right.
I love it. I love it so much. What a great character thing.
But if anyone's going to do it, it's Loki, right?
Right, yeah.
To be honest, she was fine. Played the part well. Everything worked. But to be honest, aesthetically, I feel like I wasn't overly impressed with her as that character. She did a good job. I would have, like, the whole, not doppelganger, but variants or other Lokis, I would have expected them all to be more similar.
Sure.
So there was like more of a through line, like not necessarily like a doppelganger of Tom Hiddleston every time, but maybe someone who had a lot of the same attributes, not just in character, but in like aesthetic too. Like say she had kind of like dark black, slick back hair, tall, lanky.
Yeah.
But and then the same with a lot of them, but they kind of went more for the diversity approach, which is okay. It's fine too. But I don't know. For some reason, I thought that would have been a cool thing. But then again, it wouldn't play as well if he actually was like developing feelings for her and they like looked very similar.
Yeah, exactly, right? Which is a great thing you bring up, is talking about the various different Lokis, and we do get an episode near towards the end where we find a ton of different Lokis, and the big kind of standout for apparently a lot of people was like alligator Loki or baby crocodile Loki.
That was dumb.
I get it. It's funny because you do get a shot of Frog Thor when they're panning through the dirt. He's stuck in a little jar, and they also have in this place this kind of realm that if you do get kind of deleted, you get stuck with one of these kind of time stick things, and then people were like, oh, you're just gone, disintegrated, but you actually get sent to this other realm of all these kind of destroyed things from various timelines. And there's the Thanos helicopter from the comics, which I'm sure a lot of people liked a bunch. It's weird. So basically, Joe, back in the day, Thanos in the comics, like he had his own little helicopter that said Thanos like on the side of it, and he was like, "Those Avengers," you know, like way back in the day. So,
oh wow,
right, back in the day, man, we were just like anything stuck, right? You know what I mean? Like it was just like make whatever you want, it's fine. And I'm not. That's not, guys. If people out there, I'm not harping on comics. I'm just saying comics can be very involved. And there can be a lot of things that wouldn't play today. Like if Thanos rolled in an Infinity War in a helicopter, we would have all been like, what's he doing?
Yeah, from space. A helicopter from space.
Exactly.
Where there's no air.
I don't know how, or maybe he got it built on Earth. He's like, all right, I want a yellow helicopter, and I want it to say Thanos. But the other variant...
Yeah, I hear helicopters are real badass on Earth, so when I arrive, I want my helicopter ready to go.
Exactly, right? The other Loki variants I thought were interesting. I did, you know, and maybe a lot of people felt this way, but like the old Loki I thought was fun because he looked so like comic accurate to like the old-fashioned Loki.
Yeah, sure.
And like
sure.
his whole story. I think he said he even like won. Like he's like, I killed Thor, or like a lot of the Lokis.
Yeah.
Who knows? They're probably all lying, but kind of hearing his story, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like
I know he's like old timey, like original Loki accurate with his aesthetic, but it also like, really, that's your outfit? It looks like, you know, I dressed up as Loki for Halloween and I made it out of leftover fabric at home.
Gosh, man, I wish we could have gotten the variant old school Avengers, man. That would have been really weird looking. Yeah, but that whole like realm where like you just kind of send things, and this kind of purple ghosty wolf named Eliath would kind of just consume whatever it is. So you'd get deleted from the timeline, go to this place, and then this purple ghosty wolf thing would come get you unless you kept moving or
he's
surviving.
Basically the size of like a gigantic tornado or hurricane floating around like a cloud, kind of like a gaseous figure.
Which I wasn't sure if that was going to be like the spirit of Fenrir or something like that at first. I'm sure Eliath is from the comics, but I know we're jumping around a lot, but basically the gist of the show is like kind of figuring out how Loki can get away from being imprisoned by the TVA and learning about him being a variant, his other variants, and the fact that maybe the TVA is full of and staffed by variants themselves, but they never knew it. These are just like peacekeepers that they're like, well, we were created for this bureaucracy, but actually they weren't. Like, for instance, Mobius, he has like dreams of a jet ski, and he loves jet skis and stuff like that, and there's kind of the theory out there that maybe he was, you know, like a jet ski owner, or, you know, ran a jet ski shop back in the day, and that's why he's so in love with them. But yeah,
by the way, the Liath, I think it's a Liath. I don't think it's Aliath. I think it's Liath.
I looked it up, and it's Eliath with an A.
Why do they? You can't kill Eliath. It was okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like Goliath without the G. It's like, it's weird. Yeah, an Eliath, or it's a proper noun. It's Eliath, but not like it is like there are multiple Liaths. I know. It's weird. I think
they made it sound like there were multiple Lias.
Yeah.
Like as a species. Okay.
I know. It's strange. It's odd. But anyway, so they kind of like go through trying to like, basically Loki gets trapped with Sylvie, and they're kind of like, they have to work together throughout time, and they form a friendship, but maybe more than that. And they're kind of messing things up for the TVA, but then we finally find out later on that maybe the TVA isn't all it's cracked up to be, and might be just a shadow organization, or just, not even shadow organization, just kind of like, it's fake. Like it doesn't, like it exists, but it's run by somebody else, this triumvirate.
Kind of a mysterious front, right, that was created. There's like the cyborg figures that are the timekeepers, you know, is kind of like an image thing. But he's like a puppet master behind the curtain, so to speak. We skip forward a lot, though, too.
We did, yeah.
You know, Loki helping Mobius find her, not expecting it to be a she, expecting it more to be like a copy of himself. And she has they all have different abilities. the work up to getting there was kind of, that's your main, 3-4 episodes, right? Getting to the point where they actually get together. But and she's revealed as like a woman version of him. I did enjoy that. What was I going to say? It is interesting, to see the reluctancy of Loki, our Loki, that he's still trying to kind of play some games and be conniving to try and whittle his way out of his situation. Because once he's done and he finds her, they're going to vaporize him, or so he thinks. It actually would send him to this world we've been talking about, or realm. But yeah, you can kind of see him backpedal. Like, he'll go back to his lying, conniving ways, and he'll kind of be honest and kind of genuine. Then he'll flop back and forth just based on like little things that Mobius will hit him with, or like the time loop thing where he cut off that girl's hair and she slaps him, and you'll always be alone. This and kind of tormenting him. I forget that character's name, but
Lady Sif.
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And but yeah, trying to think what else is important to cover on the build up to where we're kind of hitting.
We have Mobius also has a relationship with kind of like, I would say, judge. Like the judge, kind of the big manager of the TVA, and she doesn't even necessarily understand how it all works either. But their relationship is kind of a major point of it as well. And there's one of the guards that's kind of a major player too, and kind of how they're all figuring it out. And you kind of plant that seed of doubt in one of them that like maybe one is a variant, or that all of you are variants, and they all start thinking about that. And with Sylvie's ability, like Joe was talking about there, kind of her ability to mind meld with somebody and to infiltrate their memories and kind of put herself in her like somebody's memory.
Yeah, but she can enchant people, or somewhat infect them, or control them, or reveal things.
Yeah, but she's like, I can't make memories. I can just put myself in a memory. And she can kind of talk to people. So that's kind of her big thing, and Loki kind of wants to learn how to do that. But that kind of tells some of the people who are part of the TVA that maybe they had lives before this whole thing. Like maybe they weren't just always bureaucrats and guards and things like that, which I think is kind of fascinating. And I was like, okay, cool. And Loki wants to learn that. And I didn't know how many powers Loki had. I knew a few of them, but telekinesis was one that I forgot, or I haven't seen a lot of in the movies.
It kind of sort of with certain things, mainly the dagger, right?
Well, there's that fight they have in that basically like a Costco or Sam's Club later on, where he like summons like a metal like thing off a shelf as a weapon. He also, during that sequence on Lamentis, or whatever that place that's going to get destroyed, it's like the most powerful calamity because no one ever escapes it. He like puts a building back in place. He's like, and like a building goes back and like kind of restructures and forms. I was like,
I forgot about that.
And I was like, how does you've been holding out on us? I was like, if you got telekinesis for inanimate objects, I've always thought that to be one of the greatest superpowers ever. That's what I would take.
It's like Magneto, only you don't need it to be metal, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's some of that stuff where I was like, oh my gosh, but he also can make like fireworks out of his hands, like stuff like that. And
illusions, right?
Yeah, illusions. And this Loki is a little bit different too, because while kind of Joe, you're talking about him having these kind of schemes and stuff, this is not the I'm planning 4 steps ahead of you Loki, because it's just so crazy. He's not as manipulative.
He doesn't know enough to be able to be 4 steps ahead, because it's all so new to him and like a new concept that he didn't think would even exist.
Yeah.
But going back to his powers too, I mean, I didn't quite understand. Like, they basically take the Infinity Stones, and when you're in the TVA, like, we've confiscated, hundreds of these. They're basically paperweights now. It's like Infinity Stones. They take them and they basically like punify them.
Yeah, that hurt.
And he thinks if he steals one, he has the power to like escape or take them down, but they're just a rock at that point. It's real interesting. And also he has like no powers there, or like his durability. I don't understand. Like, 1 minute he can be slammed around by the Hulk.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily go toe-to-toe with Thor, but he's kind of on that level of God tier of I'm durable as all get out, right?
Yeah.
But in this, it's kind of like that gets squashed, or he doesn't. I,
I've seen that as a criticism of the show because, yeah, so technically Loki is a frost giant turned Asgardian, so he's pretty tough. Like, he's the type of guy that you could throw him off a building, he'd land there, it might bother him, but he'd be okay. So, Joe, I think what you're alluding to is sometimes he gets overpowered by individuals that you're like, yeah, you could probably throw him across the room. Like, you know, you just feel like, whoop, or you take a thing to the face and be like, like, so I don't know what that is, because at the TVA, sure, his magic and everything is nullified, but in the real world, when he gets his magic back, there's one thing in particular, I don't know if he does get knocked out a time or two, but you're like, huh, I don't know, because after the whole Hulk thing, everybody thinks of when he gets smashed by the Hulk, and he was like, he was still conscious for that. Like, it wasn't like that knocked him out, and you're like...
Exactly. So, like his durability, like, kind of comes and goes, or is slightly non-existent in the show, which kind of... It did bother me a little bit, because I'm like, granted, I want to be concerned for him in all these situations, but I also want to think of him as, like, the Loki I know and I like. Yeah. And know that he still has the same abilities, or he's still tough, right? Like, he's somebody to tangle with.
Like his brother here. Yeah, because if he's going toe-to-toe with Thor and they're fighting and kind of doing stuff, you think, like, he's a pretty strong guy. Like, even if Thor's holding back on you, he's pretty tough. Yeah, that's a good point. And I was trying to think of what other abilities he has, because there's just so many, and he wants to learn the mind meld thing. He just always wants to learn more, because he's like a really amazing sorcerer, and we haven't really gotten that as much here. But that consistency, I would have to go back and watch it to see it again, but I know I saw that as a common complaint amongst other people who were watching. They're like, oh, like, isn't this guy, like, he shouldn't be able to be taken down this easily. But then again, we think of Thor and how he got dropped multiple times by a taser in his neck. The god of thunder and lightning just can't take a taser, or whatever that thing was in Ragnarok. It's just the Asgardians are weak at certain things, I guess. But yeah, so the powers and stuff, that I think is tricky with somebody like him to keep going with. But I'm curious to see in season 2 what they will give him, or what he will learn, because a lot of his stuff is like, I can pull a dagger out of thin air, and that's like a pretty cool ability. Like, that could be really useful. But the Infinity Stone thing you're talking about, I think one of my favorite lines in the whole thing was maybe in the first episode, where he kind of breaks out and he finds this other guy, and he's like, he's got like a knife to him, and he's like, what's your name, or something like that. Maybe he doesn't have a knife, and the guy's like, Casey? And he's like, tell me where the Tesseract is, or I'll gut you like a fish, Casey. Like, you're like, oh, and then they kind of open the drawer. I thought that was going to be a fake out later on. I was like, maybe this TVA thing's fake, and maybe these are all fake Infinity Stones, and they just tricked Loki into holding the Tesseract and being like, it's worthless, but it's like still the Tesseract. So I hope they kind of back that up a little bit, because it's like, not that the Infinity Stones should be out of the picture completely, but I also think, like, taking the entire Infinity Saga and then just showing them sitting in a desk drawer where there's, like, 20 of them, it's like, oh, like, it hurts.
It was kind of like an eye-opening thing, right? Like, they're meaningless in this realm. Yeah, it kind of, like shocks you a little bit.
Yeah, and it's all because of the person who's kind of in charge of this, which is a character that I thought would be coming down the pipeline. I made a video about it a long time ago, and I feel vindicated.
I have no clue who he is.
That's okay.
I'm so confused.
That's all right. I'll send you the video. No, I'm just kidding. I'll talk to you about it. But yeah, they go to the ending there, and you were alluding earlier, Joe, with this kind of cool set, which gave me the same kind of vibes of, like, the end of WandaVision. There's a really cool set, like a creepy set that is, like, it seems pretty much physical, and you're like, oh, they saved, like, the really interesting, cool, creepy set for last,
Oh yeah, that castle that's shrouded on that universe, like, asteroid rock thing somewhere in that solar system, space, whatever.
Guarded by Eliath or whatever. The ghost wolf was like the fog wolf. You had to get past him and take control.
Yeah, once they entranced it revealed the castle. It was and it was like in the same realm or plane of where they were all being destroyed, at where they got what's the word when they get stuck with the stick and they vaporize?
I'm trying to remember if it's not like deleted, is it? Or something like eradicated. Something like that. disintegrated.
It's something like deleted.
Yeah.
Uh,
Removed. Expelled.
either way, yeah, that teleports him to this realm.
Yeah.
And so that Alioth is constantly eating. It basically consumes time, energy, and physical
Matter.
things.
Yeah.
Matter. Yeah.
Mm.
There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting the whole time it's kind of shrouding this location. And so once they entrance it, it reveals it. But that set was interesting, that castle and everything. You know what it reminded me of? And this is going to sound odd. If you've ever seen Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Okay.
That end castle with the clock guy.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I've seen that part.
Castle reminds me of that for some reason, minus all the clocks, I guess.
It reminded me, the outside of it, as like a part of that really famous looking one from that building in Canada, the one that like part of the Canada Pavilion has at Epcot. It's got like the green kind of like roof that goes not necessarily to a point, but it kind of like goes to like a little flat top thing. I don't know. And I also thought it was going to be Doctor Doom. I thought it was going to be like Latveria or something weird like that. I was like, let's get Doctor Doom in there, baby. And I'm like, why would he be at the end of time? But I was like, yeah. Or I kept hoping it was Ultron or something, because it was like the robots earlier on, or the cyborg things. I was like, it's got to be Ultron.
So He Who Remains is basically a normal, average person. Well, smart person. He was a scientist in 2062, the year.
Mm-hmm.
And he discovered the other universes stacked on top of each other, or planes or realms, timelines, whatever you want to call them. And he figured out a way to communicate with his variants or other forms on those planes, and they started working together, shared technology, and they created this whole thing. And next thing you know, it became, like he said, versions of himself weren't so pure of heart, and they started attacking each other's realms and destroying them all and trying to save their own and this and that. Next thing you know, he kind of gained power, wiped them all out, and created just the one. And to avoid any conflict in the future that would wreak the havoc and all that, and the war, so to speak, he basically kept it on the same timeline and created the TVA to enforce it and make sure that it would never happen again.
Yeah.
Although, all the while, the TVA, if you really think about it, and they talk about this, or he does, He Who Remains, I don't know his real name if they said it, but anyway, I've been referred to as many things, a jerk, He Who Remains, which I kind of like, and there were some other ones.
A conqueror.
A conqueror, yeah. And so anywho, but the TVA is technically, every time they go and they extract a variant or they fix a timeline that was affected, they basically, because it started a branch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they leave one of those things and it disintegrates or deletes that occurrence or that entire world. I didn't quite get that.
I think it was everything
that time clock thing.
I think it was anything like that would. It's not the whole world. It's just like little pieces of matter, because they had those little grenades that would be like the little. They put them down and it would like destroy everything that would cause that variant to just be like a different timeline that could change drastically. So it's not the whole world necessarily. They're just different timelines that. And Alioth helped with that. Helped him gain the power over these other individuals.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have a pretty good grasp of it.
Sure. Oh, and by the way, in that realm where everybody was vaporized and sent to, did you notice the ship that was kind of like crashed into the ground that was the same one that Ronan had in Guardians?
Yes, that's the Ronan ship. I was thinking it looks a lot like Thanos has one that's similar to it too. But yeah, I saw that. I was like, yep, I saw that. There's a lot of like little things in there, which I was like, oh, like this is a little, I don't know if these are nods or like what could have happened, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that he gives them the offer, or has that VR clock give him the offer of, he could send you both back to the same plane timeline. You could rule Asgard and or kill Thanos. You could be the big deal.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. But anyway, tell me about He Who Remains.
Good question, Joe. I know him, and many others may know him as Kang the Conqueror. Now, Kang the Conqueror is an interesting case of a villain because he is a very, very far-off descendant Was it 2062 or was it 2162 or something? I thought it was pretty far flung in the future, or something like that. Something. Either way.
2062.
Either way, he's in the future. He's a descendant of Reed Richards, typically, who you guys might know as Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. Now, Kang is an interesting case because he's a villain that doesn't necessarily possess any special powers. However, because he is from the far-flung future, he'll come back with technology that seems like magic. Think of him as like a very like a futuristic Iron Man, kind of. Like, he doesn't fly around in an armored suit, but he'll come back with a super throne and a little laser gun and all this stuff. And the one that I know, and there are very many different types of Kangs, Kang the Conquerors over time, but the one that I know from Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and he was kind of like Mr. Freeze. He has a wife that's stuck in like a time stasis, and he basically went back in time to prevent the Kree and Skrull war, which you might remember the Kree from, like, Ronan, the Accuser is Kree, and then the Skrulls who are popping up now here and there in Captain Marvel and all that stuff. But he went back in time to take over Earth and basically defend it from the Kree and the Skrull and prevent his wife from somehow being caught in this weird time sickness thing. It's kind of crazy, and I'm not doing it complete justice. But anyway, so he's a villain from the future who comes back to the past and tries to muck everything up, and there can be a ton of different ones of him, and they have their own little kind of group, like Joe was talking about. They're all like can be pals, but there's usually one that's like, hey, I don't really like the group of all the other Kangs, so I'm gonna kill you, or, you know, I don't want to be part of your group. For Rick and Morty fans, think of like it's like a collegiate group of Ricks. It's just like a bunch of him and different versions of him who are trying to like get together and get along, but that doesn't really work out. So, supervillain from the future coming back to the past. Kind of thought it was an interesting choice to put him in here as the kind of the big bad, as it were. And the kind of the question for a lot of people at the end is like, he's like, you can kill me, but then it's all just going to happen again because of how many versions of me there are. And like time you'll basically be back to this point, but it's not going to be me, the kind of nice one, the kind of weird one. It might be like a mean, like bad one.
Take one dictator out and don't fix any problems, and another dictator takes the place. So.
Exactly. Or he's like, or you can basically run the TVA for me, and we can just keep doing what we're doing here and preventing any other Kangs from ever happening across the main timeline right now. So, yeah, that's kind of where we get to in the end, and Sylvie just wants to kill him because she is frustrated by everything that's happened and just kind of going for all-out chaos and anarchy. And our boy Loki was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this, and he gets bested and she kills him. And then it's like, okay.
Does she kill him?
She does kill that Kang, and he just says like, oh, I'll see you soon. He's like, but it's not going to be him, but it is going to be him. You know what I mean? Like, it's a variant. Right, like it'll be a different Kang.
They didn't show her killing him though. She pushes him back through.
Oh no, I meant Kang. She kills Kang, not Loki. She pushes him back.
No, I know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember seeing her actually strike Kang.
Oh, she runs her sword right through his chest. She like moves the desk. She's like, and he's like sitting there, and she's just like right in his chest, and he's like, you know, kind of thing. Oh. He doesn't try to stop her. He's like, I can't stop you, because he is just like a regular guy. And his kind of whole point was to be like, I can either win you over or not. And he had that kind of like, I don't want to say it's a trope yet for villains, but that kind of like, I've seen this whole conversation, or it's been all read out, and then they put like the script or the screenplay like on the table. And he's like, I know you're going to say this. I'm going to say this. You're going to say, how would you know that? And I'm going to say, I know that because of this. And it's like all there on paper, right? But then he gets to a point where he's like, we just passed the moment that I've seen all this stuff before, but now this is all new territory for me. He's like, I don't know how this is gonna end. He's like, I either die or I don't.
Threshold, as he says.
Yeah. But yeah, she does kill him, but it doesn't really matter because then we get Loki back with the TVA, thinking that it's just like old school times, but instead of the triumvirate of kind of space lizards, as they say, it is now just one solitary statue that is, you know, Kang the Conqueror, kind of like, I'm guessing, going to be a little more iron-fisted in his approach to, you know, dealing with the timeline. Does that help? A little bit?
So now free will across the universe, creating timeline divergence, new timelines, which does what? Create new universes?
That's the scary, tricky thing that Marvel, I'm sure they haven't figured out, but that is one of the things that is nerve-wracking, because then you start to say, like, well, if it doesn't work out in one thing, then we'll just go do another thing, you know? That's, I think, too, with, like, time travel. That's, you know, apparently Tony Stark was supposed to figure out time travel, and that was supposed to work. Because they even bring that up. They're like, well, the Avengers use time travel. Why aren't they considered variants? And it's like, they were supposed to figure out time travel. It's like, okay, that's great. That's fine. But you also want to make sure that there are still stakes, because if you don't have that, then people just be like, oh, I don't really care if the world ends because in this timeline, because we'll just go to the next one, you know, just do something else. So I'm sure it's all part of the plan, and it's all leading up to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which I'm sure will also entail Scarlet Witch and Doc Strange just trying to fix everything. And there's a lot of possibility for fun, I think, in there with a bunch of alternate timelines. Maybe a chance to bring in the X-Men, you know. There's so many things that they could do with this. It's really a big setup for, I think, what this next big phase is all about, you know, kind of the past Thanos phase, you know, phase 4. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird show. It's very different. That last episode is very dialogue heavy. There's not a lot of action. It's just like a lot of kind of sitting and talking about what's going on, and it's like, ugh. It can be
so of
confusing.
all the series that we've seen thus far, these Marvel series on Disney Plus, this one probably the most important for future setup of anything that we may see on big screen.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, I think that, and maybe WandaVision. But this one more so because you could do anything with it, you know? Like, you open it up and you're like, we're talking about a variant timeline here, everybody. But I kind of hope they don't do that. Like, I hope they do it once with Doctor Strange, and then they just push it back down into the main timeline, because it's just too much to juggle, you know? It's so much. It's kind of like what the CW did with their kind of Crisis on Infinite Earths. You can do it once in a while, but you can't be like, we got shows like, you know, Smallville's starting back up, but it's different Superman than the one with Superman and Lois, you know, kind of thing. It's like, but yeah, no, I liked it. A little bit confusing, I think, especially that last one. But that's Kang. So Kang the Conqueror. Maybe I'll send you the video, Joe. He's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that last episode, you kind of knowing who he was, or knowing that tidbit, a little bit of a backstory would have helped you. I think otherwise, at the end, you're kind of like on a cliffhanger, and you wonder, so does Sylvie like take over managing the timeline at all?
I don't think
she
so.
Just kills him and just
we don't know where she hangs out.
Hangs out there.
Yeah. I wish when he was given his little backstory and he was talking about that, they kind of show like his little toy statue thing that is all that. I know that there's probably a budget thing. I always love to show, you know, stuff like that. I would love to have him meet himself. You know, like, and he'd be like, oh yeah, on the first day, like, I finally met myself. I'm in a lab, other guy walks through, you know, he's wearing a completely different thing, and we shake hands. It's like, hey, like, you figured it out. And be like, yeah, I figured it out too. Like, we're from different, you know, universes and dimensions. That kind of stuff. I want to see more of that. And we'll probably get more of that coming up here. And that might be the prelude to something like Multiverse of Madness, to show that stuff off more so. Who the heck knows? I don't know. But an infinite amount of possibility, right? Like, you can do anything now. Like, not that you couldn't before.
Limitless with Bradley Cooper.
Limitless. Exactly. He likes that drug because it makes his brain the best. He'll drink the blood of a druggie that has that drug because he gets the brain being the best. That makes sense. That's the plot for Limitless, everybody. But yeah, so like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I'm curious to see what season 2 brings, because again, it could go anywhere with it.
Go back, alternate timeline. Hulk is the Hulk again. Yeah.
They brought him back. He's really angry. He lost his mind. Yeah, that's true.
No longer a nerdy waste of CG.
Yeah. your words. Hulk, don't listen. I do want classic angry Hulk back. But again, maybe this will be something that they have to figure out in Loki season 2 versus Multiverse of Madness. I don't know. Maybe that's more of a Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange thing, but I still think Doc will be involved in this, and he'll be like, come on, guys. I took care of Dormammu in the first one, and now this? Like, It's just he's going everywhere, just closing portals. He's just like, I just can't. Like, please stop. You know. But yeah, I'm just really curious to see where they go with it. But Joe, do you have any final thoughts on Loki?
Final thoughts, much the same of all of the series. I enjoyed this one the most. WandaVision was fine, but only towards the end. Yeah, I like Loki. I'm partial to him. I think I don't mind that they open the door to a wide realm of possibilities.
Yeah,
kind of like that. Marvel, that cinematic universe needs that injection of. It allows them to be more creative, right? So it's fine. I agree that potentially there's too much to juggle there, but hopefully they keep it reined in and don't get too zany. Otherwise, I'm gonna
yeah. And I think
what I mean. So.
Yeah, and I think they know that. Like, I feel like at this point, I really trust them. As I say, way back in the day, it was like the fact they pulled off Guardians of the Galaxy and made me care about a talking raccoon that isn't a raccoon and a tree. You know, more or less. Like, I'm like, all right, I think they kind of know what they want to do with this. So, yeah, if it gives them more space to create, I'm all for it, and I'm very hopeful. And yeah, I'll be there for Loki season 2 for sure.
Yeah, heck yeah. And I just like Tom Hiddleston. Jeez, he embodies that character. He's great.
He's very good.
But this is also their means of getting Black Panther back. You know.
Yeah, they could do a lot of stuff, right? Or changing that. Yeah, because that's something that you can't, unfortunately, because of the passing of Chadwick Boseman, you can't bring him back that way. So you do something else, you know, or whatever else it's going to be. But yeah, that's that. X-Men, Fantastic Four, anything else, you know, if you want to do it. If you haven't already started planting the seeds, which I think they did for Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, but yeah, you can bring in a lot of stuff that you couldn't do in the first place with Iron Man way back in 2008. So, yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes for sure. Joe, I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch here, but sometimes we do a little bit of time killing, wouldn't you say? So we're just gonna briefly jump into that segment of the show that I like to call, you like to call, we all like to call. You want to hit me with it, baby?
Time killers.
That's right, it's time for time killers. I added that sound there, and I feel like I have to do the knife slash with my hand. If people who watch this, they'll be like, oh, he really does line that up. Yeah, exactly. So the games and movies and TV we've been killing time with. Joe, what have you been killing time with, buddy?
I watch Archer on repeat just for sheer relaxation.
Okay, fair enough.
Still makes me laugh every time, even if I've seen the episode. I did go see Black Widow out of convenience.
In the theater.
I think of it? In the theater, yeah. First time back since a year and a half. Anyway,
yeah, it's a while, right?
It was fine.
Okay.
It was good. I like ScarJo. I like it was very, serious, more adulted. I feel like there are some parts of it. I'm not going to review it now, but there were a lot of parts where I was just like,
Oh, I gotta hear this, man. Oh my gosh.
Impractical things. The prison escape scene, I couldn't believe the helicopter, her hanging. I mean, you would think maybe she does have superhuman strength. I don't know. Anywho, it was fine. I give it a mediocre score. I was entertained because of kind of the adultness, serious story to it, and kind of the spy thrilly vibe.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed that. And the fact that it's her, I don't dislike Black Widow as a character, none of that. And it was cool to kind of see the backstory of where she came from and how it, and the unpredictability of it and her scheming and this facial swaps and all that. Cool. But that's it. Time Killers, that's really all I have.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Thank you for asking. I was talking about Black Widow last week with a friend of the show, Kyle Bossman, and I was joking with him about that helicopter thing, Joe, just specifically here to touch on it, because before that, they wanted a jet, and I was thinking, okay, because at first when they talk about the jet versus the helicopter, you're like, oh, it's just for transportation. I was like, how are you going to get Red Guardian out of that prison with the jet? I was like, and it wasn't a Quinjet, because the Quinjet, it wasn't a Quinjet that they were talking about. So I was like, yeah, because I was like, oh, if you got that, so stuff like that. You're like, that's because Black Widow, she's got some super soldier serum in her. I think I've really just adopted that thought, and I think in the comics she sometimes does, because some of that stuff you're like, you wouldn't walk away from that, Widow. I know you're tough.
Oh, I liked her sister. Her sister was kind of cool.
Isn't she great? I really like her, and believe it or not, she's a British actress. And I'm like, I kind of bought the Russian accent, you know, that whole thing, and the whole just, you know, hating the posing. And I'm not gonna spoil everything, but I love her just being like you're this, and come on, like, you know, little girls aren't gonna look up to me the same way they look up to you. We're trained killers, like, you know. Yeah. Anyway. Saw Black Widow. We already talked about it a bunch, but catching up games. I have been playing Mad Max. It was a gift from my buddy Jason. It came out a few years ago. Kind of Arkham style combat, but set in the the desert and wasteland apocalypse of Mad Max, and it's actually pretty fun. So I've been going with that. That's kind of the biggest game. Mostly recently.
Sure. And I caught a bit of your stream of it. It looked fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It is good. It's really good. Actually, I'm like, yeah, this is a fun game. And coming off of other open world games like Assassin's Creed, it's so much smaller, which I appreciate. It's not going to be like an 80-hour game, even if I did every little thing. I don't think it'd be that long. Sure. But I also have been catching up on Attack on Titan Season 4 anime. It's really intense. And My Hero Academia, another anime. I just like anime, Joe. I just do. I love it.
That's cool.
Yeah, but besides that, that's pretty much everything. Now we're going to wrap up the show, Joe, with a little bit of that thing I love so much. Community
questions and community feedback.
Or community feedback and questions, which either one, it's whatever you want to call it.
I remembered though.
You did it. Bravo. Anyway,
what do we got?
This one comes in from the J-Strom, and I asked people about what they thought of Loki. Season 1, not just the character. He said, I thought that Loki got more interesting with each new episode, and I really liked Loki's character progression and his friendship with Mobius, which kind of got eclipsed by Sylvie in later episodes, but that was okay. I thought the final
But it was still present at the end, which I liked.
Exactly.
I agree with everything he said.
It was nice that it came back, right? Yeah. Then he continues on saying, I thought that the final episode was very interesting, and the final image, my jaw dropped. What do you want to see happen next season? I just want the show to keep surprising me.
Roll a dice. I don't know.
Loki,
what do I want to happen?
I want Loki running the timeline. There we go. That might be too much.
Him and Mobius teaming up on the beat, doing something.
Taking out so many variant timelines to deal with. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. There's, I don't know, because you want to keep the show going, right? It's almost like it has to be like a police procedural, where it's like he does stuff, but he can never be the chief. Like he has to continuously be out in the field, because if he's not, it wouldn't be as fun, right?
Trying to find Sylvie.
Yeah.
Dealing with the next version of Kang.
Yeah, exactly.
Kang
the Conqueror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. But also have some fun with your timelines, man. Like if you can go at any point in space and time, why not make it kind of like Endgame was, which is a little bit like Marvel's greatest hits. Just have him popping in and out of various like movies or events around movies, or he like shows up in Asgard and Ragnarok is happening and he's like, we shouldn't be here, like, kind of thing. Stuff like that. That's what I would like to see personally. So
I think that's a good call.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for writing in. I appreciate anytime anybody's got something to write in with. That's something I just love to hear from. So if you guys ever have a topic or feedback or anything like that, all you have to do is tweet the hashtag Critical Podcast over on Twitter to @GoCritical, or you can tweet at me personally at JimmyGood013. Send me a gif of a dog or something funny. I like that. Joe, I know you are on Twitter as well. And
I am.
And yes, look at
you can tweet at JoeLever _627. Lever just like Beaver, only with an L. Yeah, I have to look it up every time because I don't really use Twitter.
Yeah. Also,
but if I get notifications, I'll look.
Yeah, exactly, right? We have a Teespring if anybody wants any merchandise. There's some pretty cool stuff on there, but I would really implore people out there, if you want to help the show out, to leave us a review. If you can find us over on iTunes and all that. If you leave me a 5-star review, I will read your name out and the review on here. If you don't want to leave me a 5-star review, maybe send this podcast to one of your enemies. So that way it's like you think that it's a bad thing. Maybe your enemy will like it. Maybe your enemy will leave a 5-star review. I don't know why you'd be listening to this far if you didn't like the show.
If you have enemies, maybe you've gone wrong somewhere along the way.
I know, but maybe you think you're gonna like screw them over by sending them a podcast that you're like they don't know that you're enemies, or you'd be like, take this. But if you do leave a review, I would appreciate it. That would be great. But I love having people on the show, just various types of stuff, and it's just I love having you, Joe. It's just great. It's great to be on the show with you. It's been too long.
To be back.
It's been great. It's
been a hot minute.
I've had some great guests on, but you know, they're not a go-to podcast compadre. You know, it's different. It's different. I love them. I love them in a different way. But it's going to be a different thing. But I've appreciated. We've had a lot of cool guests on recently, and we'll talk about it. That's it. The next week or the week after. But I'm going to fill people in, Joe, on my life. There might be a little bit of a break from the show here for just a little bit. There's just some little things happening. Nothing bad. I'm okay. But. You know what I mean? So yeah, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Thank you to our patrons. You guys are fantastic. Thank you to anybody who watches or comments on any of these things. You really don't have to do anything else. Just let me know if you're enjoying the show and how we can make it better. Anyway, Joe,
like and subscribe. Hit the alerts notification button below, and
you're going to want to smash that like button. You're going to want to smash it so hard. Hit the bells. Ding the bell. And I want everybody here, the second it drops, when these things premiere, I want you there. I want you to deny your family time. Be like, I need to listen to this. It's a spoiler cast about Loki. Because that's really what you're feeling, right? Yeah, so there's audio versions of us on iTunes and Spotify. Somehow I'll get it on Audible maybe one day, but who knows. Anyway, Joe, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and happy to be back.
Yes, and again, like I said, the past couple weeks had some really great guests on. Please go check out their stuff, like Entertainment Landfill or Delayed Input by Kyle Bossman. All that stuff, they're so great. I love chatting with them as well. But thank you for listening. I appreciate that, or watching, or maybe even doing both. But until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome. Bye-bye.